CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. I'm Jeff Moody, live in Beijing.
You're watching CGTN.
Coming to you from Washington, D.C.
You're watching CGTN.
Coming to you from my room.
I'm members of
Mark, what can you tell us about events happening there?
politics.
This is a pretty picture.
$100.
Time you can see band.
Second time
Back over to Beijing.
To go after them.
All about
This is CGTN. CGTN. See the difference.
A big hello and welcome to our special coverage of the 19th CPC National Congress. I'm Cheng in Beijing. China's National Development and Reform Commission is hosting a press conference in about 15 minutes' time to review the achievements of China's economic development under the leadership of the CPC and to answer questions from the media. Now, this will be the fourth press conference held at the Media Center on the sidelines of the 19th National Congress. Director of the National Development and Reform Commission, He Lifeng, will speak and take questions. We'll be covering this live, plus in our studio for discussions. We do have Mr. Zhao Zhongxiu, who is Vice President at the University of International Business and Economics, and Mr. Michele Geraci, Head of the China Economic Policy Program at Nottingham University Business School, China. Now, we have about 6 minutes to go till the actual press conference of the NDRC starts. Of course, the theme is the steady, healthy and sustainable development of the Chinese economy with the guidance of the new developmental vision. Let's get to our studio guests. Let me start with you, Mr. Zhao. You know, none of this is really new, the rhetoric, the initiatives and so on. But, of course, we will see some subtle tweaks to China's development methods as we move forward. So what are these adjustments that you see ahead?
Well, from the report the President addressed to the Congress, and we found that it's a new era, new development vision, and so that's why we have a new policy. So, what's the new? New means to transist from the traditional development path to the which spectrum on the high speed to now the high quality of development, and also continue the innovation, and also the low carbon green development, and also maintain the balance of regional development, and more importantly, since a new era of globalization, that's the first the more open economic system. So that's what we lead the world to continue for this globalization. So I think this is the new vision not from China, but also for the world.
And Mr. Geraci, I mean, in terms of more practical terms, what does all this mean for foreign investors in opportunities?
Maybe less than before, because it's almost a zero-sum game. People always say that opening up globalization brings benefits for everyone, and it probably does, but in the long term. In the meantime, until we get to the long term, there are winners and losers. And of course, if I was a Chinese policymaker, I would concentrate first on developing my own country. And so
the national champions,
as we do with many reasons. There is a very strong argument even in the theory about having a protection of infant industry. They need to develop. We saw the example, for example, in the case of mobile network, how China Mobile was a little bit left out 10 years ago when the standard for 3G was being developed. Now we have champions. We have Xiaomi, maybe that is one of the biggest company in China. And so when the country needs to look after itself, as it should, people outside may suffer. And we heard before that foreign investors always find difficult to enter China. We have negative list, trade is difficult, acquisition of Chinese company in many sectors is pretty much very difficult, as it should be. China, let's not forget, it's the biggest economy almost in the world, the number 2, depending how we count it, but it's made up by people who are number 80, 85 poorest in the world. And so it's a very unusual situation. We have a big economy made up by not so wealthy people. And so the priority is on increasing income per capita of the individuals.
Do you agree with that it's a zero-sum game in terms of domestic interests and international investors?
Actually, no. I don't agree with that. It's not a zero sum, but for the past 40 years, foreign investment in China, it benefits from the development and the expansion of the China market. And in the meantime, the Chinese economy, also Chinese sector, both the state-owned and the private, also expand very quickly. So this is a sum game, and all are win from this openness and the expansion.
But Mr. Geraci meant for the short term. There are losers and winners. In the long term, yes, we perhaps will all win from China's growing prosperity.
Well, this is based on the competence. You never can maintain your advantage, and some local competitors, they will learn from you and compete, and will gain their competence.
And let's talk about the types of supply-side reforms. In the past few years, it's all been about subtraction, deleveraging, destocking, and decapacity. But now, in the new work report, we're hearing about new growth drivers, new points of demand. What particular policy measures do you see? This is for both of you. Who wants to go first?
Well, actually, we could concentrate as a situation, and now we are for the better life for the people. And that means we should take care about the high-end consumption and develop these sectors like beside the necessary goods and the luxury goods and the services and the quality of life, improve the quality of life, and also now with the new technology that we share the economy. The so-called shared, the vehicle, the bicycle, and etc. And also we are re-engineering of the product side. So that means the supply chain. You adapt the supply chain, improve the quality, and of course more modern service sector, and so more efficient service and more reliable service. So that's be, and of course develop the human resources, and that's most important, and this will be the driving force for the further development.
I know this is a key point you want to make about China's software and hardware. Go on.
Yes, because it's seen from the eyes of a foreign analyst, economist. We see China has one of the best hardwares in the world, infrastructure. Even the US now is looking at China for developing airports. You come to airports, Beijing airport, you go to JFK in New York, and you think, wow, have I landed in the wrong country? Is that America or
and
some other
trains.
place? And the trains in the US basically don't exist to the standard we have here. And I've been here, I tell you, I've been here 9 years, and the time that it takes from Beijing to Shanghai by train has gone down from 12 hours into 9, and now 4.5. The problem is that it's easy to spend money in hardware because the money is immediately invested into machinery that creates output, but when it comes to innovation, it takes longer.
Let's get back to Michele Geraci. We were asking you about broad impressions of the press conference.
Well, one general impression is, and it's true for this conference, for many others, and it's a very positive thing about China, is that China has a plan. This is very different from many other countries around the world.
They just have tweets and changing ones.
We do things to do step by step. It's like China has this, crossing the river by filling the stone, but in this case, some of the stones are very big, and so it does require planning. In many other countries in Europe, I can say this because that's where I come from. We're trying to fly, a bit blind by wire without really knowing exactly where we want to go. And maybe China doesn't necessarily know better, but it shows that it's making an effort and is aware that this is an immense challenge. It's very easy for us, sitting here and complaining, criticizing, while we just write a piece of paper and we say what should be done. One other thing is for the president of chairman of a country with 1.4 billion people to actually make all this, the puzzle of all the moving parts coming together. So this is the impressive thing that we always admire, and I think maybe there is a little bit lack of understanding in the West about how difficult this can be. And I want to emphasize that we should really be respectful of people that do this plan, the NDRC and other units, because this is a big dynamic undertaking. And the thing that is positive is China plans, and when you plan well, you meet your objective. A couple of days ago, when the GDP number came out, People were surprised, but I wasn't. China always meets and exceeds its objective, always, 99% of the times. One thing specific I want to mention is, you mentioned before, poverty alleviation. Of all metrics of economic success, GDP per capita, that we know it's not really, wealth, happiness, environment, China has done a lot. We're talking about 50 million people in the last few years, 800 million in 40 years.
But then a lot of the poverty was created in the past 30 years before the reform and opening up.
So we just discussed from 1978 on, which has been, the average income in the rural areas in 1978 was 130 renminbi per capita, and in the city 340 renminbi per capita. And
I remember when my mum earned 48 yuan a month as a teacher.
And we are talking
in
about
1984.
100 times improvement. Yes, we come from a very low base, but many other countries come from a very low base and remain at a very low base. So it is, if we split the history of China into two segments, the last 40 years have been remarkable, not just for China, but for mankind.
For sure. China has a plan. Thank you. Hold that thought. For now, though, let's get Go Yunfei in Guangzhou for bringing us that update on China's industrial transformation. Let's get back to our studio guests for impressions of the press conference. Now, what was mentioned in Go Yunfei's story about the Made in China 2025 initiative, of course, I want to ask you, Michele, what do you think of international community concerns that China is just protecting its homegrown companies and keeping out foreign ones with that initiative?
Again, from the point of view of China, this is the best thing that China can do. China realized that China cannot do services very well. To do services takes time. China core competence is manufacturing, just like a company. It has a couple of years ago reverted back to its core competence. So that's a very welcome development for China. From the point of view of foreign investors, this is what I call it the tsunami of the China manufacturing that I fear may completely wipe out the whole manufacturing industry in Europe. Except for
wipe out? Really?
Yes, because
that's drastic.
It is, because we have China is the only country that in the world can mobilize at the same time capital, labor, and even
state
know-how.
Subsidies.
State subsidies or not, it has a lot of money, has a lot of people, and so we don't. So the competition is now difficult because the economies of scale dominate manufacturing. A few weeks ago I was discussing on another TV shows about how China making bicycle can compete with European manufacturer. In Europe we make 1 million bicycle, in China 50 million. And so it is impossible to compete.
But the profits are not in manufacturing. The profits are in the core components that make up bikes and phones and planes and
that's
all
what
that.
China is doing, is doing down the value chain and regaining the competence or re-exporting the competence in making even the components. So when you compete 1 to 50 in terms of volume, yes, there may be subsidies, there may be dumping, there may be all these trade friction, but even if there weren't,
you look like you have something to add.
It's impossible to compete with 1 to 50 scale.
Well, actually, the landscape has changed since China. This is a fair playground for the competitors. Since China, we have the so-called mega domestic market. That's for the manufacturer, you can use this element. You can allocate the technology, the capital, the labor, and of course the purchasing power together. So then you have you can the more efficient production network or production process. So that's you gain your the competitiveness this for the market, and some for in the industry like the equipments. And so in China, since we have the huge demand for that, so that's our equipment manufacturing for the construction, for whatever we have a huge demand for development. While in a small company or a medium company in Europe, you just have a very limited market, so then you have less experience. So that's you cannot compete with this vast market.
Okay, thank you so much for the insights today, and of course sitting with us for that 2-hour press conference. And that was Professor Zhao Zhongxiu from the University of International Business and Economics, and of course Mr. Michele Geraci from Nottingham Business School in China. And I hope you enjoyed our coverage of the NDRC press conference as part of the 19th National Congress of the Chinese CPC. I'm Zhang Lei in Beijing. Do tell us what you think on our website, CGTN. CGTN.com. Signing out.